She woke up before sunrise, the small apartment already filled with the quiet hum of the city outside. The walls were thin, and the sounds of neighbors beginning their day drifted in like a gentle reminder that life moved on, whether she was ready or not. Her child, a little girl with bright eyes and an insatiable curiosity, was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with a sleepy smile that could melt even the hardest of mornings. She kissed her forehead, careful not to wake the child fully, and started preparing breakfast. The routine was familiar, almost comforting even if it left her drained by the evening. Life had never been easy for her. After her husband left without warning, she was left with bills, a small apartment, and a tiny human who depended on her entirely. Every day was a balancing act. She worked 2 jobs, one at a small bakery downtown where she spent her mornings kneading dough and arranging pastries, and the second as a cashier at a grocery store in the evenings. Between work, commuting, and managing her home, there was little time to breathe, let alone think about herself. Despite the exhaustion, she found joy in small things. The smile of her child, the rare compliments from co-workers, the quiet moments of watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled over the streets. She lived for these moments because they reminded her that her life, although hard, was still beautiful in its own small ways. On this particular morning, she was running behind schedule. The laundry had piled up and the fridge was almost empty. She made do with what she had, quickly frying eggs and toasting bread. Her child watched her with a mixture of amusement and curiosity, asking questions about everything, from why the sky was still dark to why the toast smelled so good. She answered patiently, knowing that these small exchanges were precious. They were the threads that held her life together. After breakfast, she rushed to get ready for work, quickly brushing her hair and pulling on the uniform that had become part of her identity. It was plain and simple, but it carried the weight of responsibility she bore every day. As she stepped out of the apartment, the cool morning air hit her face and she took a deep breath, bracing herself for the day ahead. The bus ride was long and crowded, filled with people who seemed lost in their own worlds. She clutched her bag tightly, feeling the weight of groceries, lunch for her child, and a few personal items she managed to squeeze in. She watched the city wake up, the streets slowly filling with cars, the distant sounds of construction and honking blending into a familiar symphony of urban life. At the bakery, she was greeted by the smell of fresh bread and coffee, a small comfort in an otherwise demanding routine. Her coworkers nodded at her as she walked in, some with tired smiles, others too busy to notice. She slipped behind the counter, quickly getting to work, her hands moving almost automatically as she prepared the day's orders. There was a rhythm to the work that she had come to rely on, a comforting predictability that contrasted sharply with the chaos of her personal life. Customers came and went, some polite, some impatient, but she handled each one with patience and grace. She had learned early on that anger and frustration did not solve anything, especially when her own life felt like a constant battle. Each interaction, no matter how small, was a chance to remind herself that kindness still existed in the world. By mid-morning, she felt the familiar ache in her back and the tiredness in her legs, but she pushed through. She had learned that exhaustion was a constant companion, and complaining did little to change it. Instead, she focused on small victories, like finishing a difficult order without mistakes or seeing a customer leave with a smile. During a brief break, she stepped outside, letting the sun warm her face. She watched as a group of children played in the street, their laughter echoing in the quiet morning. She felt a pang of longing, wishing her life could be simpler, less burdened by responsibilities. But then her child's face flashed in her mind, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Everything she did was for that little life that depended on her. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of flour, coffee, and polite conversation. By noon she was exhausted, but she still had a few more hours of work at the grocery store. She packed a small lunch, hardly tasting it as she focused on the tasks ahead. The bus ride to the second job was just as crowded, and she clutched her bag tightly, feeling the weight of both the physical load and the emotional strain. At the grocery store, she greeted familiar faces with a tired but genuine smile. She scanned items, answered questions, and bagged groceries with practiced efficiency. Customers often complimented her on her patience and friendliness, and she accepted the praise quietly, knowing that she did what she had to do not for recognition, but for survival. As evening approached, she felt a sense of relief mixed with lingering exhaustion. Her shift was ending, and soon she would be on her way home. But the thought of returning to the quiet apartment, preparing dinner, helping her child with homework, and handling the endless chores brought a sense of weariness. She was caught in a cycle, one that seemed endless, yet she faced it with resilience. One evening, after a particularly long day, she was walking home through the bustling streets, the city alive with lights and sounds. She noticed people laughing, couples holding hands, families sharing moments of joy. She felt a mix of happiness and longing, wishing for a life that offered a little more warmth and companionship. But she kept her head high, focusing on the small joys she did have. It was during one of these walks that she noticed a flyer pinned to a lamppost, advertising a local event. Something about it caught her eye, a faint sense of curiosity and possibility that she hadn't felt in a long time. She tore the flyer carefully and tucked it into her bag, thinking that maybe, just maybe, she could find a moment of escape from her routine. That night, as she tucked her child into bed and kissed her goodnight, she felt a mix of exhaustion and hope. Life was hard, yes, but she was determined to face it head on. She sat quietly for a few moments, listening to the soft breathing of the child beside her, feeling a profound sense of love and responsibility. It was these moments that reminded her why she kept going, why she endured the hardships, and why she continued to hope for something better. Little did she know, her life was on the verge of a change she had never imagined. A simple act of kindness, a decision made in a moment of empathy, would set in motion events that would alter the course of her life. But for now, she faced the night with the quiet strength that had carried her through so many days, unaware that the world outside her apartment was preparing to introduce her to someone who would see her, not just for her struggles, but for the strength, warmth, and courage that defined her. That evening, after finishing her long shift at the grocery store, she felt an unusual sense of relief. The city streets were alive with lights and chatter, and for the first time in weeks she allowed herself a moment to pause and just watch people. She clutched her bag tightly and walked at a slower pace, letting herself breathe in the cool night air. It had been another long day, and she was already thinking about the warm bed waiting for her and her little one at home. As she turned a corner toward her apartment building, she noticed a commotion outside a small bar. Laughter, shouts, and the occasional crash of glass filled the air. Curious, she slowed her pace and watched from a distance. A man had stumbled out of the bar, clearly drunk, leaning heavily against a lamppost and muttering to himself. He wore an expensive suit, slightly rumpled, and his expensive shoes were scuffed from the street. His tie was loose, his jacket unbuttoned, and he looked completely lost. Most people would have passed by, avoiding the trouble that seemed likely to follow. But something about him tugged at her heart. He seemed harmless, just lost and in need of help. Without thinking much, she approached him cautiously. "Do you need some help?" she asked gently, her voice cutting through the noise around them. The man blinked at her, confusion and relief flickering across his face. I just need to get home," he slurred, leaning heavily on the lamppost. His words were unclear, but his intention was obvious. She hesitated, considering the risks of helping a stranger, especially one who clearly had been drinking, but the thought of leaving him alone, vulnerable on the streets, felt wrong. "I can drive you home," she said finally, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. She felt the weight of her own caution, but compassion overrode it. He looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief in his eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked, still wobbling slightly. She nodded. "Yes, I just want to make sure you get home safely." "Can you get into my car?" She led him carefully to her small sedan parked nearby. He stumbled a little but managed to get in with her help. She buckled her seatbelt, glanced at him, and sighed. He seemed smaller somehow when seated, less imposing than she had imagined, despite the expensive suit and air of authority he carried when standing. The drive was quiet at first. She kept her eyes on the road, but she couldn't help sneaking glances at him in the rearview mirror. He was dozing lightly, head leaning back against the seat, mouth slightly open, his hands resting limply on his lap. Something about the vulnerability of the moment struck her deeply. Here was a man who seemed to have everything, yet in this moment, he had nothing but the kindness of a stranger. She broke the silence gently. "Are you okay? Do you need water?" He blinked, trying to focus. I think so," he mumbled. His voice was soft, almost fragile, a stark contrast to the confident presence he likely carried in his office. She nodded, offering a reassuring smile. She didn't ask questions about who he was or why he was out so late. Tonight he was just a person in need of help, and that was enough. As they drove through the quiet streets, she felt a strange mix of curiosity and caution. There was something in him that felt familiar, though she couldn't place it. His features were strong with a kind of quiet intensity, and there was a gentleness in his eyes despite the weariness that came from too many late nights and too much responsibility. She wondered what his life was like, what stories lay hidden behind that confident exterior. They arrived at a high-rise apartment building, clearly upscale, with lights glimmering in every window. She helped him out of the car, steadying him with a careful hand. He stumbled slightly and she guided him up the steps. The doorman watched curiously but didn't interfere, and she noticed the man giving a small appreciative nod in her direction. She felt a faint smile tug at her lips. "Thank you," he said softly once they reached the lobby. There was sincerity in his voice, something she hadn't expected. I don't know what I would have done without you." He looked at her in a way that made her heart skip a beat, not in a romantic sense, but in a recognition of her importance in that moment, recognition of her humanity. She shrugged lightly, trying to downplay the impact. "It's nothing. Just glad you're safe." She handed him a bottle of water she had kept in her bag for emergencies, and he accepted it gratefully. The simple exchange felt intimate, as though they had shared a small but significant connection. He offered to pay her for her trouble, but she refused politely. "I can't accept this. I'm just glad you're okay," he insisted, reaching for his wallet, but she shook her head firmly. There was a dignity in her refusal, a strength that he seemed to recognize immediately. He finally relented, smiling at her in a way that was both charming and humble. Before she left, he asked her name, and she told him quietly, almost shyly. He repeated it as if savoring the sound. "Well, thank you, her name, truly, I won't forget this." She felt a strange warmth in her chest at his words. It was not the kind of warmth that comes from wealth or flattery, but from a genuine acknowledgement of her kindness. Walking back to her car, she felt a mix of relief and curiosity. The encounter had been unexpected, and yet it stirred something within her, a sense that life had a way of surprising those who least expected it. She returned to her apartment, her mind buzzing with thoughts about the man she had helped. There was something about him that lingered, a quiet presence that refused to leave her thoughts. The next day at work, she found herself distracted, replaying the events of the night before. She wondered who he really was, what kind of life he led, and why he had been alone and vulnerable in a city filled with people. She tried to push the thoughts aside, focusing on her tasks, but they returned again and again, persistent and insistent. Days passed, and then one afternoon she received a call. It was him. Her heart skipped a beat as she answered, and his voice, steady and genuine, filled her ears. He thanked her again for helping him and explained that he had wanted to reach out to express his gratitude properly. They talked for a while, carefully at first, exchanging small details about their lives. She learned that he was a CEO, someone who had built a company from the ground up, but he spoke with humility, not arrogance. Their conversations became more frequent. He would check in, asking how she was, how her child was, and sharing small, amusing anecdotes from his own life. There was a rhythm to their exchanges, a gentle ebb and flow that was comforting. She found herself looking forward to his calls, even if she tried to convince herself that it was just polite gratitude. There was something about his presence, something authentic and kind that resonated deeply. One evening, he suggested meeting for coffee, and she agreed, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They met at a small cafe, her heart racing as she approached. He greeted her with a warm smile, and for the first time she saw beyond the suit and the title. Here was a man who was human, vulnerable in ways she had never imagined. And it was this vulnerability that made him relatable and real. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives, their struggles, their dreams, and fears. She spoke about the challenges of raising her child alone, the exhaustion, the moments of doubt and loneliness. He listened, genuinely interested, offering empathy and understanding without judgment. In return, he shared glimpses of his own pressures, the isolation that came with success and the moments when he felt lost despite having everything. By the end of the evening, she realized that something profound was beginning to take root. A connection had formed, fragile but undeniable. built on kindness, understanding, and genuine care. She left the cafe with a sense of hope and curiosity, wondering how this unexpected encounter could evolve into something meaningful. Little did she know, that night was the beginning of a journey neither of them could have anticipated. A journey that would challenge their assumptions, reveal their true selves, and ultimately change their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The simple act of helping a stranger had opened a door, one that would lead to unexpected friendship, trust, and perhaps even love, in the most miraculous of ways. Over the next few weeks, their connection grew in a way neither of them had expected. What began as polite exchanges of gratitude slowly transformed into long, meaningful conversations. They spoke about ordinary things at first, the weather, favorite books, movies they enjoyed. But gradually the conversations deepened. She began to share her worries, the struggles of balancing work and parenting, and moments of loneliness that often weighed heavily on her. He listened attentively, never interrupting, never making her feel rushed. In his presence, she found a space where she could speak freely, where her thoughts and feelings mattered. He, too, opened up in ways he had not before. He spoke of the pressures of running a successful company, the loneliness that came with wealth, and the fear that people valued him only for his status and money. He admitted that he rarely met people who treated him like a normal human being, who saw past the veneer of success to the person beneath. There was an honesty in these exchanges that both surprised and comforted her. She realized that despite their vastly different worlds, they shared a need for understanding, for genuine human connection. One Saturday afternoon, he invited her to a quiet park in the city. It was a place removed from the hustle and bustle, a serene space with benches under tall trees and a small pond where ducks paddled lazily. She hesitated, unsure if it was wise to accept, but curiosity and a faint sense of excitement won over. When she arrived, he was already there, waiting with a warm smile. He stood as she approached, his presence calm yet welcoming, and offered a hand that she accepted briefly, appreciating the gentle strength it conveyed. They walked slowly, talking about small things at first, the way leaves turned in the autumn breeze and how sunlight filtered through the branches. Then conversation shifted naturally to more personal matters. She spoke about her child, the joys and challenges of parenting, and the sacrifices she had made to ensure a stable life. He shared stories of his own upbringing, the lessons learned, and the moments that had shaped him into the person he had become. Their stories were different, yet both carried a common thread of resilience and hope. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they sat on a bench near the pond. She noticed the way he looked at her, not with admiration for her kindness alone, but with a genuine interest in who she was. It made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she realized that she could allow herself to feel something more than casual friendship. Though she was cautious, aware of the vast differences in their lives, he sensed her hesitation and reached out, gently touching her hand. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried a profound weight. "I don't want to rush anything," he said softly. "I just want you to know that I enjoy your company. You've brought something unexpected into my life, and I'm grateful for it." She looked down at their hands, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the afternoon sun. "I enjoy spending time with you too," she admitted quietly, a smile tugging at her lips. The honesty in her voice reflected the trust she had begun to place in him. Their meetings became more frequent, often spontaneous, each encounter deepening their bond. They discovered shared interests and small quirks about each other that made the other smile. He admired her determination, the way she handled challenges with grace and persistence, and she found herself drawn to his humility, his ability to remain grounded despite his success. It was a relationship built not on wealth or status, but on mutual respect and understanding. One evening, he invited her to a small dinner at a quiet bistro. She felt a flutter of nerves, wondering what the evening might hold. The setting was simple, intimate, with soft music playing in the background. As they shared a meal, conversation flowed easily, laughter punctuating moments of reflection. They spoke about hopes for the future, the kind of lives they wished to lead, and the values that guided their decisions. Each revelation strengthened the connection between them, revealing layers of personality and depth that neither had anticipated. Through these interactions, she began to notice small changes within herself. Her confidence grew, fueled by the encouragement he offered and the respect he showed for her choices. She felt more capable, more deserving of happiness, and less weighed down by the constant stress of survival. It was as if his belief in her abilities mirrored the belief she had struggled to maintain in herself. And in turn, he seemed to soften, the harsh edges of corporate life giving way to a more compassionate, reflective man who valued connection over accomplishment. There were moments of vulnerability, too. She sometimes felt the sting of self-doubt, wondering if she belonged in a world so different from his, but he never dismissed her concerns. He listened, offering understanding and reassurance without condescension. And in those moments, she realized that trust was growing, not blind trust, but a careful, deliberate trust that came from observing his consistency, his respect, and his patience. Their bond was punctuated by small gestures, texts checking in, shared jokes, and thoughtful surprises that demonstrated his attentiveness. She began to feel seen in ways she had not experienced for years, and it was a revelation that brought both comfort and a touch of trepidation. She was wary of opening her heart fully, aware of the fragility that accompanied human connections, but the pull of their growing relationship was undeniable. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves caught without an umbrella, huddled under the awning of a small shop. She laughed at the irony of their situation, and he smiled, matching her lightheartedness with a warmth that seemed to fill the space around them. It was moments like these, simple, unscripted, that cemented the bond they were building. It was not grand gestures or material gifts, but shared experiences, empathy, and genuine care that created the foundation of something extraordinary. As weeks turned into months, they began to meet more frequently, exploring the city together, discovering new places, and enjoying shared meals in quiet cafes. They attended community events, laughed at the oddities of city life, and even shared moments of quiet contemplation in parks or along riversides. Their connection grew in depth and intimacy, not through grand declarations, but through consistency, presence, and understanding. She found herself anticipating these meetings, feeling a sense of excitement that was both thrilling and unfamiliar. She noticed how her mood lightened after spending time with him, how her outlook seemed brighter, and how the burdens of everyday life felt a little more manageable. It was as though his presence added a new dimension to her existence, a gentle, steadying force that reminded her of the possibilities that lay beyond mere survival. For him, she became a source of comfort and inspiration. Her resilience, kindness, and warmth offered a perspective that contrasted sharply with the transactional relationships he was used to. He admired her strength and the way she balanced the demands of life with grace. In turn, he offered support, encouragement, and a listening ear, creating a space where she could feel valued, respected, and understood. As the seasons began to change, so too did their relationship. The bond they shared was no longer confined to occasional meetings or phone calls. It had begun to intertwine with the rhythms of daily life, influencing thoughts, decisions, and aspirations. Both recognized that something meaningful was developing, something rare and precious, built on the foundation of empathy, respect, and authentic connection. She sometimes wondered what the future held, cautious not to let hope outpace reality. But in the quiet moments, she allowed herself to imagine a life where companionship, trust, and mutual respect were not just fleeting possibilities, but enduring realities. And in those moments, she felt a sense of possibility, a quiet belief that life could offer more than she had dared to hope for. He, too, reflected on the transformation he was experiencing. Her presence had brought a sense of clarity and fulfillment that had been absent despite his success. He realized that the value of life was not measured solely in achievements or wealth, but in the depth of human connection, the ability to share experiences, and the opportunity to support and uplift someone else genuinely. Together, they navigated the delicate balance of friendship and something more, discovering the nuances of compatibility, trust, and emotional intimacy. Their relationship was evolving organically, free from the constraints of expectation or societal pressures, allowing each of them to grow, explore, and embrace the joy of mutual understanding. By the end of this period, it was clear that their connection had become a pivotal part of their lives. It was no longer merely a bond formed out of a single act of kindness, but a relationship built on consistent care, empathy, and the gradual unveiling of their true selves. Both felt the beginnings of something transformative, a recognition that love and companionship could arise in the most unexpected circumstances and that life, with all its challenges, could also offer profound and miraculous possibilities. As their relationship grew, so did the complexity of their lives. It was no longer just about shared conversations or weekend outings. Real life intruded in ways neither of them had fully anticipated. She continued her demanding routine of working long hours and caring for her child, while he managed the relentless pressures of his company. Balancing these worlds was challenging, yet the bond they had created proved resilient, a source of support and encouragement. One evening, he suggested helping her in a small, thoughtful way, offering to assist with a project that had been overwhelming her. She hesitated, wary of the implications. Accepting help felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. Her life had always been about self-reliance, about doing everything on her own. Yet there was a sincerity in his offer that she couldn't ignore. Reluctantly, she agreed, deciding to trust his intentions. It was a small step, but one that marked a shift in how she approached the relationship and her own life. He arrived the following weekend, arriving early with materials and plans in hand. They worked together side by side, completing a task she had struggled with for months. The experience was surprisingly joyful, filled with laughter and shared effort. She realized that allowing someone to help did not diminish her strength. Instead, it enriched her life, making challenges more manageable and moments more enjoyable. It was a lesson in humility and trust, one she had not fully embraced before. Despite these moments of growth, there were challenges that tested their connection. Friends and family occasionally questioned her involvement with someone so different, hinting at motives or warning her to be cautious. She struggled with these doubts, torn between caution and the genuine feelings she was developing. He too faced pressures from his world, colleagues and acquaintances who could not understand the depth of his connection to someone outside his social and economic sphere. These external pressures added tension, yet they faced them together, communicating openly and supporting each other's choices. Through these experiences, she discovered strength within herself that had lain dormant. She began to see her own worth more clearly, recognizing that her life, while challenging, had prepared her for resilience, empathy, and the capacity to nurture meaningful relationships. Her child thrived as well, witnessing a partnership built on respect and care, a model of connection and trust that shaped her own understanding of relationships. He, in turn, grew in ways that surprised him. Exposure to her daily struggles, her authenticity, and her unwavering care helped him reevaluate priorities he had once taken for granted. Success and wealth remained important, but they no longer defined his identity. He began to value patience, understanding, and the joy of supporting someone he genuinely admired. Her perspective became a lens through which he reassessed what truly mattered, bringing clarity and balance to a life that had often felt overwhelmingly fast and transactional. One day, she faced a significant challenge. An unexpected expense threatened to destabilize the careful balance she maintained. Bills, rent, and her child's needs converged, creating a situation that seemed impossible to navigate alone. She struggled with pride, unsure whether to accept help from him, fearing it might shift the nature of their relationship. Yet she could not ignore the reality that support was necessary. When she finally confided in him, he listened without judgment, offering assistance in a way that respected her autonomy and dignity. His support was not merely financial. It came with guidance, encouragement, and practical solutions that empowered her, rather than creating dependency. He helped her organize her finances, prioritize expenses, and explore options she had not considered. The experience was transformative, not because it solved every problem instantly, but because it demonstrated the power of partnership and trust. She realized that accepting help could coexist with independence, that collaboration did not negate personal strength. Their relationship continued to deepen, marked by shared experiences and mutual growth. They celebrated small victories, completion of projects, milestones at work, or moments of joy with her child. Each event reinforced the understanding that they were stronger together, not in a conventional sense of wealth or status, but in the intangible ways that made life more manageable, meaningful, and fulfilling. Conflict arose occasionally, as it does in all human connections. Misunderstandings, differing expectations, and moments of insecurity tested their bond. Yet each challenge was met with communication and reflection. They learned to navigate disagreements without judgment, listening to each other's perspectives and acknowledging feelings without dismissiveness. Through these challenges, trust deepened, emotional intimacy strengthened, and respect for one another grew. He also began to integrate himself into her life more naturally, spending time with her child in meaningful ways. They played, learned, and laughed together, creating memories that anchored their connection in shared joy and trust. She observed his patience and kindness, noticing how genuine his care was. These interactions bridged the gap between their worlds, fostering a sense of family and belonging that extended beyond romantic affection. She too embraced moments of vulnerability, allowing him to see her fears, hopes, and dreams. She spoke of aspirations she had once thought unattainable, moments of doubt and insecurity, and the simple desire for stability and happiness. He listened attentively, offering encouragement, validation, and a belief in her potential. This mutual openness fostered a profound emotional bond, one built on authenticity rather than pretense. Through their shared journey, both recognized the transformative power of human connection. Life's challenges, though demanding, became opportunities for growth, empathy, and understanding. They celebrated resilience, acknowledging that strength was not defined by independence alone but also by the ability to trust, accept support, and build a life enriched by mutual care. As the months passed, their relationship evolved from cautious companionship to a partnership grounded in respect, understanding, and deep emotional intimacy. They navigated external pressures, personal insecurities, and everyday challenges with a commitment to honesty and empathy. Each experience reinforced the foundation of trust they had carefully constructed, demonstrating that genuine connection could flourish despite differences in background, lifestyle, and circumstance. By this stage, she began to see a horizon of possibilities that had previously seemed unattainable. Life was still demanding, but it was now filled with moments of joy, hope, and anticipation. She allowed herself to imagine a future where her efforts were shared, her burdens lightened, and her emotional world enriched by the presence of someone who genuinely cared. And he too recognized that the most meaningful aspects of life were not the accolades or wealth he had achieved, but the ability to share experiences, support someone unconditionally, and grow together through the trials and triumphs of life. The pivotal moment came quietly, without fanfare. One evening, after a long day, they sat together on a park bench, the city lights reflecting softly on the water nearby. She spoke of her fears, of the doubt that sometimes clouded her confidence, and of the uncertainty she felt about opening her heart. He listened, his expression calm, his presence steady and reassuring. Then gently he reached for her hand, a simple gesture that carried profound meaning. "I am here for you," he said softly. "Not to take over, not to change who you are, but to stand beside you. Whatever life brings, I want to face it with you." She felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and hope, realizing that she could allow herself to trust him fully. In that quiet moment, she understood that their relationship had become a source of strength, resilience, and possibility. It was no longer just about companionship. It was about partnership, mutual respect, and the transformative power of trust and empathy. She felt a sense of clarity, a recognition that life, with all its challenges, could also offer moments of miraculous change when hearts were open and willing to embrace connection. The days that followed were filled with a new rhythm, one shaped by partnership, trust, and shared hope. She began to notice the subtle but profound ways in which her life was changing. Her home, once defined by exhaustion and quiet routines, now echoed with laughter, warmth, and the sense of support she had longed for. The presence of someone who genuinely cared brought balance, and she felt the burdens of her life become lighter, not because the challenges disappeared, but because she no longer faced them alone. He became an integral part of their everyday world, not as a savior but as a partner. Together they navigated schedules, responsibilities, and unexpected challenges, always communicating and respecting each other's boundaries. She found herself trusting him in ways she had never imagined, appreciating his patience, understanding, and the small gestures of thoughtfulness that demonstrated his care. The bond between them was no longer fragile. It had matured into something strong and reliable, built on honesty and empathy. Her child thrived in this new environment. The little one's laughter and curiosity seemed to multiply, nourished by the presence of someone who offered kindness and attention without demanding anything in return. He played with the child, helped with homework, and became a figure of reassurance and fun, someone who brought joy and stability into their lives. Observing their growing connection, she felt a profound sense of relief and happiness, realizing that the future now held possibilities she had scarcely dared to imagine. As their relationship deepened, moments of reflection became frequent. They often spoke about the journey that had brought them together, marveling at the improbability of it all. A simple act of kindness driving a stranger home had led to a connection that transformed both their lives. They recognized that life's most meaningful changes often arose from small, seemingly inconsequential moments that had the power to ripple outward in ways neither could have anticipated. One evening, they sat together on the balcony of her apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She felt a sense of peace that had been absent from her life for years, a quiet assurance that she was exactly where she needed to be. He spoke softly, sharing thoughts about the future, about the kind of life he envisioned for them. She listened, feeling a mixture of excitement and gratitude, knowing that she could finally allow herself to dream freely without fear or hesitation. They began planning small steps toward a shared future, simple things like organizing their schedules to spend more time together, planning weekend outings, and discussing goals for her home and career became acts of collaboration that strengthened their bond. Each decision, each conversation, reinforced the idea that they were building a life together, grounded in respect, trust, and genuine care. Challenges continued to arise, as life rarely offers a perfect path. Unexpected expenses, work pressures, and personal doubts tested their patience and resilience. Yet they faced these challenges together, using open communication and mutual support to navigate difficulties. Each obstacle became an opportunity to deepen their understanding of one another, to demonstrate commitment and reliability, and to grow emotionally. Through these experiences, she began to see herself in a new light. The strength, resilience, and determination that had carried her through years of hardship were now complemented by the support and encouragement of someone who believed in her. She recognized her own value, not just as a mother or worker, but as a person deserving of love, respect, and happiness. This self-awareness became a source of empowerment, motivating her to embrace opportunities and envision possibilities that had once seemed out of reach. He, too, experienced a profound transformation. The connection he shared with her provided emotional grounding, a counterbalance to the pressures of his corporate life. He discovered the joy of giving without expectation, of supporting someone's growth without attempting to control it. Her presence brought clarity and perspective, reminding him of the human essence beyond titles, wealth, and societal expectation. Together, they learned that life's true richness lay in connection, empathy, and shared experience. Their relationship reached milestones that were deeply personal rather than public. Shared meals, quiet evenings, and moments of laughter became treasured rituals. They celebrated small successes, acknowledged each other's growth, and supported each other through setbacks. These ordinary yet meaningful moments reinforced the extraordinary nature of their bond, illustrating that transformation often comes through consistent care, understanding, and love. One afternoon, they attended a community event, holding hands as they navigated the crowd. She noticed how he engaged with people of all backgrounds with respect and humility, and she felt pride in the man he had become through their connection. He in turn observed her confidence and grace, recognizing how she had grown into a person who balanced strength with warmth and resilience with joy. In these shared experiences, they saw reflections of the better selves they were nurturing in one another. There were moments of reflection where she considered the journey that had brought them together. She remembered the night she had driven a stranger home, unaware of the life-altering impact of that simple choice. The memory filled her with a sense of wonder and gratitude, emphasizing the unexpected ways in which life can unfold. It was a reminder that courage, kindness, and openness could open doors to possibilities beyond imagination. As time passed, they began discussing long-term aspirations. Conversations about future plans, dreams for her child's well-being, and goals for personal growth became natural and hopeful. These discussions were grounded in practicality, empathy, and mutual respect, illustrating the depth of their partnership. They were not just imagining a shared future. They were actively building it, step by step, with intentionality and care. She noticed how her perspective on life had shifted. Challenges that once seemed insurmountable now felt navigable. Her confidence and optimism had grown, nurtured by the support and understanding he consistently offered. She felt capable of embracing opportunities, taking risks, and envisioning a life filled with joy, stability, and love. Her child, too, flourished in this environment, gaining confidence, happiness, and a sense of security that only genuine care and partnership could provide. He marveled at the change he witnessed in her, inspired by her resilience, adaptability, and capacity for love. Her presence in his life reminded him of the importance of authenticity, humility, and emotional connection. Together, they had cultivated a bond that transcended superficial measures of success, emphasizing the value of shared experience, empathy, and mutual growth. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the city skyline, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her life had been transformed not by grand gestures or luck alone, but by a sequence of small intentional acts that had built a foundation of trust, care, and partnership. She reflected on the journey from exhaustion, loneliness, and uncertainty to a life filled with hope, love, and stability. The realization brought tears to her eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of the miraculous nature of change. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. "We've come a long way together," he said softly. "I'm grateful for every moment, every challenge, and every joy we've shared. I hope you see how remarkable you are, how much strength and love you bring into the world." She squeezed his hand in return, feeling the depth of their connection in that simple gesture. It was a moment of acknowledgement, of shared understanding, and of the life they had created together. The days that followed were marked by continued growth, shared joy, and the deepening of an extraordinary bond. Their lives, once separate and burdened by challenges, had merged into a partnership grounded in respect, trust, and love. She embraced the possibility of happiness, knowing that her strength was now complemented by a supportive, caring presence. He celebrated the richness of human connection, recognizing that his life had been transformed not just by success but by genuine, heartfelt relationships. In this final phase of the journey, the story of a lonely single mother and a successful CEO became a testament to the power of empathy, kindness, and courage. A simple act, a drive home on a cold night, had sparked a connection that would reshape their lives, illustrating that the most meaningful transformations often arise from the smallest, most sincere choices. Their shared path highlighted the potential for love, support, and human connection to create miracles, offering a story of hope and inspiration that transcended circumstance and reminded them of life's boundless possibilities. Ultimately, she found herself living a life she had never imagined, one filled with warmth, security, and joy. She no longer faced challenges alone, and her heart was open to the transformative power of love. He in turn discovered a depth of happiness and fulfillment that success alone could never provide. Together they had created a life that was remarkable not for its grandeur, but for the richness of connection, mutual growth, and the quiet miracles of shared existence. And in this new life they both recognized that the unexpected, the ordinary, and the human could combine to create the most extraordinary outcomes.